thank you, Ashley, for that. Very interesting as well. I'm going to keep a close eye on the Milestones API requirements as well as they come through. Okay, Lars, this one for you. Okay, so my name is James Toon. I'm the product manager responsible for the Pure Award Management module. Yeah, it's my pleasure basically to give you a quick update on where we are with the award management module, and in particular with a focus on how we can use some of the new functionalities we've included for purposes of managing compliance and process orchestration. So just before we get started, for those in the room who don't already know about the Pure Award Management module, so the Award Management module is the solution we've built for institutions to help support their overall funding success. It's an additional module, basically, that works as a workflow solution in relation to research office operations. So it tends to work in a different domain space to the scholarly communications operations. And using the award management module, as you've just heard there with Ashley, we can improve compliance management, and we can also combine that with funding institutional as a product within Elsevier to complete a package solution for how we get funding information opportunities down to researchers to submit for funding. And it works together with Pure's already proven research information system, so we can combine for ongoing reporting further. And it's a growing demand. We've now got around 140 customers plus worldwide, and we're supporting multiple national, international type use cases as we go. So what drives us overall in terms of the process as it stands? So finding opportunities, we want to make sure that the most appropriate funding opportunities get into the hands of the most appropriate researchers, so they can kind of make those applications of funding as much as they can. We want to make sure that the technology we make available to you is supportive, helps move you forward, helps develop functionality, helps develop your opportunities, improves your funding success. We want to be able to showcase those funding outcomes so that when the projects are completed, you're able to then talk about your successes, you'll be able to kind of showcase and help build on reputation and impact. And then we want to make use of the existing data that's in Pure to be able to support the process of making strong, robust funding applications. So combining with the data we hold, combining with things like the CV module to be able to support our better funding applications. We serve the sort of four main components, if you like, of the research funding lifecycle. So research development in terms of getting the funding opportunity information into Pure, getting that funding opportunity information into the hands of the right people and stimulating them to actually kind of make the applications for funding they need to make. We support the pre-award stages of the process where the applications are assembled, they're discussed internally, all the necessary compliance requirements are managed and maintained, ultimately up to the point when a submission is made to the funder. We then subsequently support the post-award space. So once we've had notification of success, how we then sort of manage the process of handling the post-award deliverables, how we handle the process of understanding the research finding, how it's being spent, so we can look at kind of things like expenditure details and research commitments. And then we actually then sort of obviously link to and support the showcasing of research outcomes that are linked to those fundings, which obviously then leads to the ability to be able to feed back to the funders themselves with a view to then help promote and return on investment that's being made. So in terms of the process orchestration toolkits we have, so there is some fairly major work we've done of late to improve the process orchestration toolkit in the back end. This is one of 3 different workflow mechanisms that exist in the Pure Award Management module. So there's lots of flexibility there in terms of deciding how you want to do what you want to do. The process orchestration toolkit is by far and away the most flexible and lets us do an awful lot in terms of being able to kind of handle the overall kind of workflows. We've done a lot of work as well with milestones. Milestones are a very kind of significant component now. They handle the task management, if you like, specifically related to funding. And we've applied those across multiple content types because they are ultimately extremely valuable in lots of different contexts. They exist on applications, they exist on awards, they exist on projects, they exist on contracts, they exist on ethical reviews. And we also introduced in the last few years a new content type which is called the review content type, which effectively represents like a sort of survey form that allows you to be able to kind of gather rich information that may be required at various different stages within your application to be able to then inform how you progress forward going. And we've also improve the way we handle commenting in the workflows. So this was something we wanted to do because we realized that commenting is an integral part of the workflow of any research office. So notifications, emails, messaging, commenting is as fundamental as being able to kind of create content types and work with them. So what we did here was we were looking at the actual kind of research activity and realizing that in not all cases during complex kind of workflows, you needed to be able to send the application straight back to the research investigator. There were situations where you needed to be able to kind of put in place blocks for progression, but allow you to be able to kind of create threaded conversations that can support Q&A, if you like, with PIs and other kind of interested parties. And then when they're completed, they can then move forward in the workflows. Very, very important part of the overall kind of process, something we're actually kind of working on now to improve a bit further as well. So just really kind of going back to this kind of notion of process orchestration. Now, obviously this is very small. I don't expect you to be able to kind of read that, but this is just an example of the sort of process orchestration we're actually being implementing for customers. This is an actual customer example we have in place now. So this was basically one designed to be able to kind of accommodate multiple different complex kind of routing requirements within the organization. There are, in this particular case, we have 5 different process workflows that are implemented for this customer, and they all allow us to be able to kind of direct traffic according to need. So we're actually looking at the data on the applications. We're using that information to then sort of direct where the research flows go. We're using that information to be able to direct where particular compliance requirements are needed and can be met. The way we do that is through building out these kind of gateway-based approaches on the process flows, and in there we can build scripts and expressions that will allow us to be able to kind of make choices. Typically, evaluations, true-false type evaluations based on data that's in there, but making use of that to then kind of move forward as we kind of go. So they can get pretty hairy, pretty complex, but actually extremely valuable, and it does actually represent what happens in a research office. And in terms of the review and assessment mechanisms, for example, in a similar way, if we sort of zoom into sort of parts of these overall kind of process flows, we're looking at, for example, how we can investigate the data that's related to the application data. The example I'm specifically using here is looking at the PI that's linked on the application record and saying this PI has a job title of head of department. So if I'm going through my workflow, I know I have a potential conflict of interest if I'm asking my head of department to sign off their own application. In this case here, we're picking that up as part of the workflow and rerouting that application approval flow to a third party, say, for example, a dean of research or some other individual that may be required. We can also then send forms to those individuals using the review content type that will allow us to be able to say, okay, right, we understand there may be a conflict here. Can you please confirm some details about whether or not you have any outside interests, any other financial kind of connections to this particular application, etc., to help support the way we can then handle the information flows as we're going through the process flow. In a similar vein, we can use the milestone content type as well in this regard. So basically, we come across a situation here where I'm looking at export controls. I may be looking at, for example, whether or not a funder or collaborator on a grant comes from a country that's on a particular restricted list, in which case I may require an additional kind of workflow step where I need an export control manager to go out and check, organize, see whether or not we did any export licensing in this scenario. So again, using the workflow, we're investigating data that's linked to the data. We're saying, okay, who are our funders? Who are the collaborators? They're external organizations. Let's look at their country codes. And using that information, we can then handle the routing in sort of different directions. We're then using milestone templates in this case here. So where we've got a particular set of tasks that relate to the process of export control, I'm then assembling those and asking those to be signed off, completed prior to my progressing forward in the application. I mentioned before on the commenting processing here, so again, I've got a check here. I'm looking at a document check. I'm saying, do I actually have the right documents attached at this part in the workflow? If I don't, what do I do about it? I can then stop the workflow moving forward and I can ask the PI questions about that. So can I say, please, can you send me the information I need? I can then make sure that gets attached appropriately and then we can progress the flow forward from within there. And in doing that, of course, I've required a question to be answered. I retained that audit on my record. I've been able to block my flow going forward and then release it again. And all in so of doing so, I haven't had to send it all the way back, which is they're saving time for having to re-go through all the research approval processes that I had before it as well. And outside of the actual kind of process orchestration flows, we've also started to work on making sure we can support some of the more like traditional kind of use cases, if you like, a bit more effectively. So in the case where, for example, we need to run an ethics kind of control check on here, we can create ethics applications related to the process flows. That may come up as part of the actual kind of workflow requirement as well. And in completing those, we can send out reviews to the necessary individuals, complete the information, we can get them to then send back data to us that will allow us to be able to kind of assess whether or not that review should be completed and can progress. If for some reason there's some block, we may say this is an approved with conditions, we know those conditions may need to be met, we can assemble those conditions through milestones on the actual application records. Those application milestones can then be completed, that we can then resend the whole that review back through the process again, including where necessary the documents that came to those milestones, so that the review can be reassessed, reapproved, and ultimately then approved to allow us to be able to progress going forward. So a raft of kind of workflow related functions that can kind of really kind of move through the process here. So basically, there's some examples of what we've been doing, parts of the kind of the process where we can support some of the better compliance kind of needs for organizations. We are continuing to work through these functionalities as we go. A lot of focus at the moment is looking at how we can make these flows more efficient and more effective for users. There's a lot of moving parts at the moment. We're trying to make sure those moving parts are consolidated into a really kind of sensible form. So we're making use of the opportunity with the new user interface design to be able to kind of improve the way that works. And we are continuing to look at automation opportunities. I mentioned the work we've been doing, for example, on the ethical review process. So kind of finding ways to be able to kind of actually add appropriate flows in stages that makes sure we can do things in a more effective kind of fashion there. And as I alluded to earlier on in the process as well, one of the things we are really trying to work on now is to really improve how we support the actual kind of commenting and notification of our colleagues in the research offices to make sure that, in fact, they get the right information at the right time to be able to make the right levels of decision making. So yeah, so that's basically my kind of quick run through where we are. Hope that was okay. If anybody has any particular questions, I'd be very, very happy to either show you, come and find me afterwards.